There's a peculiar heaviness that settles into the bones of those who see too much, too soon. It is not the kind of weight you can measure or the kind of burden you can simply set down at the end of a difficult day. It lives deeper than that, woven into the very fabric of how you perceive reality itself. You wake up one morning and the world has not changed, but you have, and suddenly everything that once made sense feels like a theater production where everyone knows their lines except you. The conversations that once engaged you now feel hollow, like echoing chambers of repeated phrases and recycled thoughts. The ambitions that once drove your peers now seem like elaborate distractions from questions no one wants to ask. And you stand there, in the middle of your own life, feeling simultaneously too young to carry what you see and too aware to pretend you do not see it at all. This is a weight of understanding the world before its time. And if you have felt it, if you're feeling it right now as these words reach you, then you already know that this is not a burden you chose, but a shift in consciousness that chose you. What John Piaget spent his lifetime studying was how human beings construct their understanding of reality, how we build mental frameworks to make sense of the chaos around us, and crucially, how those frameworks must continuously break down and rebuild themselves as we encounter information that no longer fits our existing models. He called this process equilibration, this constant dance between stability and disruption, between what we think we know and what forces us to think again. But Piaget was examining children, tracking predictable stages through which most humans pass as they develop from infancy to adolescence. What he did not focus on, what perhaps he could not have fully articulated, is what happens when someone leaps ahead, when consciousness accelerates beyond the timeline that society has mapped out, when you find yourself dismantling frameworks that others your age are still comfortably inhabiting. This is not about being smarter or better. This is about perceiving patterns in human behavior, social structures, and collective unconsciousness that typically remain invisible until much later in life, if they become visible at all. And when you see these patterns early, when the veil lifts before you have built emotional resilience and social positioning to handle what lies beneath, you carry a weight that others cannot understand because they are not yet holding it themselves. Think about how a child learns that the world is bigger than their immediate family, or how an adolescent discovers that authority figures are fallible, or how a young adult realizes that the promises of career and achievement do not automatically deliver meaning and fulfillment. These are developmental awakenings, moments when our mental schemas can no longer accommodate reality as it actually is, forcing us to expand or completely reconstruct how we understand our place in the world. Piaget would say this discomfort, this cognitive disequilibrium, is necessary for growth. The tension between old understanding and new perception drives us to evolve. But what happens when these awakenings come in rapid succession, or when they arrive before you have the social support and life experience to contextualize them? What happens when you are 16 and you suddenly perceive the performance of identity in your classmates? Or when you are 20 and you recognize the cycles of trauma being unconsciously repeated in every relationship around you? Or when you are in your early 30s and you see through mythology of success that your entire culture is built upon? You do not have the luxury of gradual adjustment. You do not get to slowly accommodate this new information into a stable worldview. Instead, you experience a kind of free fall, where everything you thought was solid reveals itself to be constructed, agreed upon, but not necessarily true. The weight comes from the gap between what you now perceive and what others around you are still unconsciously participating in. You sit in a meeting at work, and you can feel the unspoken hierarchies, the ego posturing, the way everyone is performing a version of professionalism that has nothing to do with the actual work and everything to do with maintaining a collective illusion of importance. You attend a family gathering and you watch as the same conversations repeat themselves year after year, the same conflicts dressed in different specifics, The same emotional patterns passed down through generations like heirlooms no one questions. You scroll through social media and you see the desperate grasping for validation, the curated authenticity that is itself performance. The collective agreement to pretend that surface-level connection is the same as genuine intimacy. And you feel crazy, not because you are wrong, but because you are alone in seeing it, or at least alone in your immediate environment. Everyone else seems fine, seems engaged, seems to find meaning in things that now feel transparent to you. The weight is the isolation of perception, the loneliness of seeing through illusions that others are still living inside of. Piaget talked about assimilation and accommodation, the two processes by which we integrate new information. Assimilation is when we fit new experiences into our existing mental structures, interpreting reality through the lens we already have. Accommodation is when reality refuses to fit, when we are forced to change the lens itself. Most of human life operates through assimilation. We encounter something new, and we categorize it, label it, make it fit into what we already believe. This is comfortable. This is how we maintain a sense of continuity and stability. But awakening, true awakening, is almost entirely accommodation. You cannot fit what you are now seeing into your old frameworks. The frameworks themselves are what you are seeing through, recognizing as constructs rather than truths. This is why awakening is often described as a dismantling, a dark night of the soul, a death before rebirth. You are not just learning new information. You are watching the entire operating system of your consciousness reveal itself as one possible program among many, not the objective reality you thought it was. And once you see that, once you recognize that your culture, your family, your own personality are all constructed responses to conditions rather than fixed truths, you cannot unsee it. The weight is the irreversibility of this awareness. You do not get to go back to sleep once you have woken up. Pause for a moment and feel into this. How many times have you tried to share what you are seeing with someone you love, someone you thought might understand, only to watch their eyes glaze over or see them subtly distance themselves from you? How often have you felt the urge to scream that everyone is sleepwalking, that the emperor has no clothes, that the entire structure of normalcy is a shared hallucination, only to bite your tongue because you know how you will sound? If this resonates with you, if you have felt a specific kind of isolation, I want you to share in the comments by simply writing, "I recognize this way to seeing." Your words might be exactly what another awakening soul needs to read today to know they are not losing their mind. And if you feel called, share one moment when you try to speak your truth and felt profoundly misunderstood. I am reading every comment, every story, and I want you to know that your experience is valid, even when the world around you suggests otherwise. The developmental theory that Piaget built was linear and stage-based. You move from sensor-motor to pre-operational to concrete operational to formal operational thinking, each stage building on the last, each one expanding your capacity to understand increasingly abstract and complex ideas. But consciousness awakening does not follow this neat progression. It is more like a spiral, or perhaps like a building collapsing and rebuilding itself simultaneously. You might have one area of your life where you are operating from a highly awakened, deconstructed awareness, and another area where you are still clinging to old patterns because the alternative is too destabilizing. You might oscillate between moments of profound clarity and moments of desperate confusion, not because you are failing, but because you are attempting to hold a paradox that human cognition is not designed to hold. You are trying to function in a world built on one set of assumptions, while simultaneously seeing through those assumptions. You are trying to maintain relationships with people who are operating from a level of consciousness you have moved beyond, not out of superiority, but out of a shift in perception you did not choose. This requires a kind of psychological flexibility, a tolerance for ambiguity and contradiction that most people never have to develop because they never leave the consensus reality that their culture provides. Here is what Piaget understood that becomes crucial for awakening souls. Children do not passively receive knowledge from the world. They actively construct it, building their understanding through interaction and experience. Reality is not something that exists independently and then gets downloaded into our minds. Reality is something we participate in creating through the frameworks we use to interpret our experience. This is constructivism, and it is a foundation of understanding why awakening feels so disorienting. When you begin to see the constructed nature of reality, when you recognize that what you have called truth is actually a shared agreement, a collective decision about what to pay attention to and what to ignore, you lose the ground beneath your feet. If reality is constructed, then what is real? If your personality is constructed, then who are you? If your culture is constructed, then what actually matters? These are not abstract philosophical questions when you are living them. These are existential crises that shake every aspect of how you move through the world. And the weight of seeing this early, before you have built a new foundation to stand on, is immense. Society has a vested interest in keeping people asleep, not through some malicious conspiracy, but through the simple mechanics of how social structures maintain themselves. Every institution, every tradition, every unquestioned norm exists because enough people agree participate in it. The moment a critical mass of people stop participating, the structure collapses. So there are countless subtle and not so subtle pressures to conform, to assimilate, to fit yourself into the roles and expectations that keep the machinery running. You are rewarded for playing along and punished, often through social exclusion or economic precarity, for stepping outside the agreed-upon script. When you awaken early, when you see through performance before you have secured your place within it, you face a terrible choice. Do you pretend? Do you put on the mask and perform the role, knowing it is a role, feeling the falseness of it with every interaction? Or do you refuse? Do you insist on authenticity even when it costs you belonging, opportunity, and the comfort of being understood? Neither choice is easy. Pretending corrodes your soul from the inside. Create a split between who you are and who you are presenting to the world. But refusing often leads to isolation, to being labeled as difficult or weird or too intense, to watching doors close because you will not play the game everyone else is playing. The person who awakens before their time becomes a kind of translator, living between worlds. You can still speak the language of consensus reality. You remember how it works, but you are no longer a native speaker. You can engage in small talk. You can perform interests in topics that feel trivial compared to what you are grappling with internally, but there is always a part of you that is observing, that is aware of performance even as you participate in it. This double consciousness, this simultaneous participation and witnessing, is exhausting in a way that people who have never experienced it cannot fathom. It is not just that you are doing the things everyone else is doing. You are doing them while holding the awareness that they are constructs, while feeling the weight of that awareness, while longing for someone, anyone, who can meet you in that deeper place of recognition. And when you do not find that person, or when you find them rarely and fleetingly, the loneliness is profound. You are surrounded by people. You are embedded in communities and families and workplaces, but you are alone in your actual experience of reality. The weight is this existential solitude, this knowing that the thing you most want to share, the way you actually see the world, is the thing that most separates you from others. What Piaget also recognized, though it is less discussed, is that cognitive development is not just about acquiring new skills. It is about loss. Each time you move to a new stage of understanding, you lose the simplicity of the previous stage. The child who develops object permanence can no longer experience the magic of peekaboo the same way. The adolescent who recognizes that parents are flawed human beings can no longer rest in security of seeing them as infallible protectors. The young adult who sees through the mythology of their culture can no longer draw comfort from the narratives that once gave their life shape and direction. Awakening is loss. You lose your innocence, your ability to take things at face value, your capacity to find satisfaction in pursuits that no longer align with what you now see as true. And you grieve these losses, even as you recognize that you would not go back, even as you know that the awareness you have gained is more valuable than what you have lost. The weight includes this grief, this mourning for a simpler way of being that is no longer available to you. But here is what is essential to understand. This weight, this burden of seeing, is not a flaw or a curse. It is a sign that you are participating in the evolution of consciousness itself. Every person who awakens, who sees through the illusions, who refuses to keep pretending, creates a tiny crack in a collective trance. You might feel isolated. You might feel like your awareness is a lonely burden, but you are part of a larger pattern, a movement that is happening across the planet as more and more people find they can no longer participate in systems and stories that do not serve life. Piaget studied individual development, but he understood that individuals are always developing within a context, influenced by and influencing the culture around them. Your awakening is not happening in a vacuum. It is happening because a collective consciousness is shifting, because the old structures are becoming unsustainable, because something new is trying to be born. And you, whether you wanted this role or not, are part of the birth process. The weight you carry is not meaningless suffering. It is the growing pains of the species learning to see itself clearly for perhaps the first time. The isolation you feel is temporary, even though it might not feel that way right now. What actually happens, what Piaget's framework helps us understand, is that you are ahead of the curve, but the curve is moving. Others are awakening at their own pace, in their own ways. The loneliness is not because you are broken or because awakening itself is isolating. The loneliness is because you are in a transition period, moving out of one paradigm before critical masses move with you. But they are coming. You see evidence of this everywhere if you know how to look for it. More people questioning the narratives they were handed. More people stepping away from careers and lifestyles that looked good on paper but felt empty in practice. More people seeking authentic connection instead of curated image. More people willing to sit with discomfort instead of medicating away with distraction. The shift is happening, and you are not alone, even when it feels like you are. You are a forerunner. Someone whose consciousness is accelerated beyond the cultural average. And while that comes with real challenges, it also comes with profound opportunity. You get to be part of creating what comes next. There is a difference, a crucial difference, between the weight of seeing and the weight of carrying what is not yours to carry. When you awaken early, when you see patterns and dynamics that others are still unconscious of, there can be a tendency to feel responsible for waking them up, for fixing what you see as broken, for somehow forcing the people around you to see what you see. This is where the weight becomes unbearable, not because of what you perceive, but because you're trying to control something outside your domain of influence. Piaget understood that you cannot force someone to move to a new stage of development before they are ready. The structures have to be in place. The contradictions have to be felt. The old framework has to prove itself inadequate before the organism, whether an individual or a culture, will let it go. Your job, the only job you actually have, is to be true to your own awareness, to live from the place of consciousness you have reached, and to trust that your authenticity will be a beacon for others when they are ready. Not to convince, not to proselytize, not to drag anyone along, but simply to exist as proof that another way of seeing and being is possible. When you release the impossible burden of trying to control other people's awakening, the weight shifts. It does not disappear. You are still carrying the awareness of what you see, but it becomes more manageable because you are only responsible for your own journey. You get to ask yourself, how do I want to live now that I see what I see? What choices can I make that align with this deeper truth I have accessed? How can I create pockets of authenticity and meaning in my life, even if the world around me is still operating on autopilot? These questions are empowering because they return agency to you. You might not be able to change the collective, at least not directly, but you can absolutely change how you personally navigate the collective. You can choose which environments you spend time in, which relationships you invest in, which work you dedicate your energy to. You can start to build a life that reflects your awakened consciousness rather than waiting for the world to catch up before you make changes. This is where Piaget's concept of active construction becomes so relevant. You are not passively receiving a reality that is being imposed on you. You are actively creating your experience through the choices you make, the meaning you assign, the frameworks you use to interpret what happens. Yes, you are constrained by circumstances, by economic realities, by social structures, but within those constraints, you have more freedom than you might realize. The weight starts to lift when you stop waiting for external validation and start trusting your own inner authority. When you stop needing others to confirm what you are seeing and start acting as if what you are seeing is real, because it is. When you stop trying to fit yourself back into spaces that no longer accommodate your expanded consciousness and start seeking or creating spaces that do. This is not about spiritual bypassing or pretending that systemic issues do not exist. This is about recognizing that you cannot wait for permission to live authentically, because that permission is never coming. The systems that benefit from your compliance are not going to release you. You have to release yourself. Something profound happens when you make this shift, when you stop resisting the weight of your awareness and start working with it instead. You begin to see that what you thought was a burden is actually a gift, albeit a challenging one. Your sensitivity, your ability to perceive what others miss, your refusal to accept surface explanations, these are not flaws. These are the very qualities that allow for genuine transformation, both personal and collective. The weight you carry is the weight of consciousness itself, the heaviness of seeing clearly in a world that prefers comfortable illusions. But consciousness, true consciousness, is not actually heavy. What makes it feel heavy is the resistance, the trying to fit it back into old containers, the loneliness of feeling different. When you stop resisting, when you find even one other person who sees what you see, when you start to build a life that honors rather than hides your awareness, the quality of the weight changes. It becomes more like ballast, something that grounds you, gives you depth and stability, rather than something that drags you under. Think about how an anchor works. It is heavy, yes, but that heaviness serves a purpose. It keeps the boat from drifting with every current and wind. Your awareness, the things you see that others do not yet see, functions like an anchor. It prevents you from being swept along by collective currents that would take you somewhere you do not actually want to go. It grounds you in a deeper truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. The weight is not the problem. The problem is when you fight against the anchor, when you try to be light and drifting like everyone else appears to be. When you deny the depth you have access, because depth is not celebrated in a culture that values speed and surface. But when you accept the anchor, when you let it hold you in place while you figure out where you actually want to sail, the weight becomes useful. It becomes an asset rather than a liability. Piaget spent years watching children struggle with cognitive disequilibrium, that uncomfortable state between old understanding and new capacity. He saw how children would sometimes regress, retreat to earlier patterns when a new stage felt too challenging. But he also saw that given time and support, they would integrate the new level of understanding, and it would become their new baseline. What you are experiencing is cognitive and spiritual disequilibrium on a massive scale. You have outgrown the frameworks you were given, and new frameworks have not yet solidified. You are in the liminal space, the in-between, the chrysalis stage where the caterpillar has dissolved but the butterfly has not yet formed. This is the most uncomfortable part of any transformation. You cannot go back to who you were, but you do not yet fully know who you are becoming. The weight is the uncertainty, the groundlessness, the feeling that you are free falling with no guarantee of landing safely. But every person who has gone through significant awakening can tell you the same thing. You do land. You do integrate. You do eventually find a new baseline that incorporates what you have seen without being crushed by it. The weight lessens not because you see less, but because you become strong enough to carry what you see. Part of that strength comes from community, from finding your people, your tribe of fellow awakening souls who can see you fully and love you not despite your intensity, but because of it. These relationships are different from the connections you had before awakening. They are not based on shared activities or superficial compatibility. They are based on mutual recognition, on the relief of finally being able to speak the language of your actual experience and having someone understand. When you find these people, and you will if you keep moving toward your own authenticity, the weight immediately feels more bearable because you're no longer carrying alone. This does not mean you abandon everyone who is still asleep. Some of those people you love deeply. But it does mean you stop expecting them to meet you in places they cannot yet access, and you stop betraying yourself by pretending to be smaller or less aware than you are in order to make them comfortable. You can love someone and outgrow the dynamic you had with them. You can honor what a relationship once was while acknowledging that it no longer serves your evolution. This is not cruelty. This is discernment. And it is necessary for anyone serious about living from awakened consciousness. The world needs people who have carried this weight, who have seen too much too soon, who have had to grow strong in their own authenticity because there was no other option. Every social movement, every paradigm shift, every evolution in human consciousness has been led by people who saw what was coming before it arrived, who recognized the limitations of current structures before those limitations became obvious to everyone. You might feel like an outlier, like you're on the margins, but margins are where change originates. The center is always trying to maintain itself, to preserve the status quo. The edges are where new possibilities emerge. Your weight, your awareness, your refusal to pretend, these make you an edge walker, someone who exists between the old world and the new one that is trying to emerge. This is not a comfortable position, but it is a necessary one. Someone has to be willing to stand in the discomfort of transition. Someone has to be willing to see clearly even when clarity is painful. That someone is you, if these words have resonated with your soul. If you felt that subtle vibration that confirms an inner truth, consider joining us in this ongoing journey of awakening. By subscribing to the channel, you are not simply receiving content. You are connecting with a community of souls who, like you, are awakening in a world that often prefers sleep. Each video is created with the intention to illuminate one more step of the path we are walking together. This channel exists as a sanctuary for awakened minds and sensitive hearts. If you felt understood today, if something here touched that part of you that rarely finds echo in the outer world, know that there is more. By subscribing, You are creating for yourself a regular space to reconnect with truths your soul already knows. This is not about numbers. This is about nurturing this field of consciousness we are cultivating together. The weight of understanding the world before its time is not something you chose, but it is something that has chosen you for a reason. Piaget showed us that cognitive development happens through challenge, through encountering information that does not fit our existing frameworks, through being forced to expand beyond what is comfortable. Your early awakening, as difficult as it has been, has given you capacities that most people will never develop. You know how to hold paradox. You know how to think independently. You know how to question authority and convention. You know how to tolerate uncertainty. You know how to sit with existential discomfort without immediately reaching for distraction. These are not small things. These are the capacities that humanity desperately needs as we face increasingly complex challenges that cannot be solved with old paradigms and linear thinking. Your wait is not random suffering. It is preparation. You are being forged in the fire of early awareness because the world needs people who have been through that fire, who have come out the other side with their authenticity intact and their capacity for clear seeing sharpened. So yes, it is heavy. Yes, it is lonely. Yes, there are days when you wish you could go back to seeing less, feeling less, caring less about the profound dysfunction and suffering embedded in systems that most people take for granted. But you cannot go back. That option is not available. The only way out is through. The only way to lighten the weight is to fully accept it, to stop fighting against your own awareness, to honor the gift of perception you have been given even though it came wrapped in challenge. And when you do that, when you finally stop resisting your own consciousness, something shifts. The weight does not disappear, but it transforms. It becomes sacred. It becomes purposeful. It becomes the very thing that connects you to others who are also carrying it, who also see what you see, who also refuse to pretend that everything is fine when it clearly is not. You are not alone. You have never been alone. You are part of an awakening that is happening globally, quietly, in the hearts and minds of sensitive souls who could not keep sleeping even if they tried. Welcome to the path. The wait is the admission price, but the view from here, the clarity, the authenticity, the depth of connection that becomes possible, that is priceless. And you are exactly where you need to be.